Hello and welcome to the CBB Supershow. I'm your host, Walter Waddell, aka Deuce85. I am coming to you live on the FTN Network, 9 p.m. on the West Coast. Those of you watching live past midnight, I do appreciate that continued support you guys give us, or if you're watching on demand as well. We are rolling right along here. So far, we have covered the Pac-12, the Big 12, and tonight we are going to cover the Big 10 Conference. Tomorrow, ACC talk with a guest host, so that's exciting. And then next week, there will be Big East talk. There will be SEC talk. There will be mid-major talk. Then we'll wrap it up, and we'll get ready for that first DFS slate on November 6th. Can you believe it? It's like Christmas. Let's go. All right. I am going to get right into it tonight. We're going to try and just whip through this. I'm going to talk about each roster in the conference. I'm going to at the end give some of my takes on a breakout player and all the awards and everything. So let's just dive right in here talking about this Big 10 conference. It's a good one. It's a good one. Now, I don't think it's as strong as the Big 12. I don't think it's as strong as the Big East. But this is a conference that, they beat up on each other and they tend to get a lot of teams in the tournament. And yeah, they do have a tendency to sometimes underperform in the tournament. But the fact of the matter is they get teams into the big dance. And there's some exciting groups here. Obviously Purdue is going to be high on that list. Losing to a 16 seed or not, they are a team you have to respect with Zach Edey. Michigan State, one of my favorite teams in the country, and somebody that I got, basically right when the season ended last year, a Final Four bet on them that I'm feeling pretty positive about. We'll talk about their roster. The Terps, Ohio State's looking a little different. Wisconsin's got a new star, and then you have a bunch of teams like Nebraska, Penn State, Minnesota, Northwestern that are going to have some interesting fantasy options, but they're not going to be particularly great in terms of winning games and going far. So this conference definitely going to be a little on the top heavy side. Wouldn't shock me at all to see Purdue or Michigan State make the Final Four, but then no other team make it out of the first round. I do feel a lot more positive about Rutgers than I think most people do in that group. And there's a couple of guys on Nebraska that I'm pretty excited about. But let's go right into it. Let's start at the bottom and work our way up. We'll start with the obvious team that is just, probably going to be looking for a new coach after this season. We're talking about the Minnesota Golden Gophers. Third season for Ben Johnson. He got dealt a raw hand, man. Kind of inherits a team that's got no identity. Everybody leaves. He brings in some low major transfers. Hasn't quite worked out. Last year's team had some solid players on it. Jamison Battle, Jaden Henley, Talon Cooper. Unfortunately, all of those guys are gone. Has to go back to the transfer portal again. Gets Elijah Hawkins from Howard, who solid 13 points per game, 44% three-point shooter. Gets my guy Mike Mitchell from Pepperdine, 44% three-point shooter, averaged 11.4 points per game, 4 rebounds, 5 assists, over a steal. I like Mike Mitchell a lot, but this team really didn't do a whole lot else. Jack Wilson transfers in from Washington State, more of a role player. They do have a freshman from Lithuania and Chris Kines, and Cam Christie, another freshman. This roster, though, it's pretty tough. They do bring back Braden Carrington, Dawson Garcia, who will be the star of the team, of course. Pharrell Payne, who a lot of people pick as they having a breakout season, a little undersized as the 5 on this team. They still have Joshua Ola Joseph, who has been really mediocre throughout the course of his career. But for some reason, when Minnesota has an injury and he has to play the starting 5 or the starting 4 and he's chalk, he absolutely melts the DFS slate. It's happened 3 different times and he has gone nuts each and every time. Parker Fox still around. Isaiah Innen, who's on his 5th or 6th season. Will Romberg, just a bunch of role players. Caden Betts, who's a redshirt freshman. So, the cupboard's bare. The nice thing about this is the starters in this lineup will get a lot of playing time. They will be viable options, no doubt. Dawson Garcia is somebody who's going to play a lot of minutes, have a very high usage. With Jamison Battle gone, that was a very high usage, high shot rate, out the door, 27% shot rate. Took 150 2-point field goals, 190 3-point field goals. Battle pretty much had the green light to fire each and every time he took the floor. So him gone, and then Talon Cooper gone. You should see Dawson Garcia build on last year's 29% shot rate, 26% usage rate. He had a defensive rebounding rate of 18.8%. I think all of those numbers go up. He shot about 34% from long range. I think we see his volume go up as well as his percentage as well. Got ahead of myself. And he has a 72% free throw shooter as well. So a big season expected for Dawson Garcia. Very mobile, very agile, versatile, 6'11" kid. Can play multiple positions, can defend multiple positions. He is going to be very, very good. We know that by now. I love Mike Mitchell. Mike Mitchell is my dude. I think he can play in the NBA. I really, really do. He is somebody that's going to come in from day one, make up that new look backcourt with Elijah Hawkins. Hawkins, all MEAC first team last year, led the league in assists. So he's a nice piece that gets to play next to Mitchell. But Mitchell is just this dude that's going to, hit tough shots, set the table, have the green light similar to Jamison Battle. He'll definitely handle the rock a little bit, but he's somebody I think is going to be a big-time scorer, perhaps a better version of Jamison Battle and somebody that we can rely on. I think he's going to be a very good option. I'm very, very excited about him. Cam Christie is actually the younger brother, I feel like I should mention this, of Max Christie. Shouldn't gloss over that, the freshman coming in. So has some lineage there, some pedigree, if you will. He's going to have to play a lot of minutes, it looks like, looking at this roster with the cupboard being quite bare. Guys like Innen, Carrington, Ola Joseph, they're just not super exciting. If Innen can be healthy, he can definitely contribute. Parker Fox, who is dealing with injuries himself, former Division II All-American, somebody who's going to have to overcome some major knee issues. He has missed the last couple of seasons, but if he can be healthy, he's somebody that's definitely exciting. I do worry about an injury like that, though, zapping any and all, upside from him and bounce and all that stuff. So that's Minnesota. Don't love it, but I think it's really obvious where the DFS production is going to come from, and that's, at the end of the day, really all we need and what we can hope for. Pharrell Payne, like I said, a popular breakout candidate, and I do think he'll play quite well. All right, moving up to the Nebraska Cornhuskers. Fred Hoiberg in his 5th season, not found that success that he had at Iowa State. Yes, Dawson Garcia. So Trevor, all Minnesota had last year, pretty much. I mean, you gotta say though, Talon Cooper, he was no scrub, right? He was no scrub. They showed flashes. They didn't have a bench, but yes, he's definitely a star. And he's going to have to do a lot this year too. But I think Talon Cooper, who has transferred to South Carolina, I think we need to give him some credit, man. We need to give him some credit. All right, so Nebraska, they haven't had the same success under Fred Hoiberg that we've seen in the past from Coach Miles, and Hoiberg when he was at Iowa State kind of set the trend even before Coach Musselman, hitting the transfer portal up. Hoiberg's the original transfer king. Loses Derek Walker. Derek Walker, one of my favorite players last year from a fantasy standpoint. You guys know I love the quarterback style big men that run a lot of the offense. They get up to the foul line, high post. They're getting assists. They're getting jumpers. They're doing the pick and roll stuff. Derek Walker's assist rate was ridiculous for his size. He's going to be missed. Sam Griesel, he's going to be missed, kind of a jack of all trades player. And Emmanuel Bandumo, who could score a little bit, is also going to be missed. But they do retool. Bryce Williams transfers in from Charlotte. Love Bryce Williams. Averaged 14 points per game, shot about 40% from long range, just over 5 rebounds per game. He's going to play a lot. He's the early chatter from scrimmages and talk there about all the transfers coming in. Rink Mast, arguably the leader of the team as he's coming in and an important player. Jerron Coleman will also be important, but most of the word coming out is that Bryce Williams is going to have the green light. He's going to be a semi-alpha here. Yes, we'll talk about Kasai Tamanega here in a second, but Williams is going to be able to take a ton of shots and have a high usage on this team. And he comes from a program in Charlotte where he didn't really get coached up. Under Ron Sanchez, it was pretty porous. I think, with Hoiberg, he's going to be able to nurture him a little bit, and he's going to be able to still do his thing and play at a high level. You look at his numbers last year on 146 attempts, again, 39% three-point shooter, 26% usage rate, 28% shot rate, defensive rebounding rate of 22%, which was solid for him. He played on that team with Ali Khalifa. We talked about him last night, transferring over to BYU. Pretty solid group. It's quite surprising that they didn't have a better season overall. Williams, they did very good in the secondary tournament, but I think he's going to flourish here for Nebraska. I'm playing next to Tamanega, who's going to have a lot more respect, not going to catch anybody off guard and not be overlooked this year. So Bryce Williams, my favorite. Josiah Alec transfers in from New Mexico, kind of the fourth or fifth option for New Mexico at times. He had a couple of big breakout games, but for the most part, he was a pretty inconsistent option. Somebody who can fill a role for this team, get some rebounds, block some shots. Not super exciting, but definitely a guy with upside in the right situation. Rink Mast comes in. Like I said, right away, they're talking about him being kind of the leader, transfers from Bradley, has a lot of the Derek Walker type mold, solid enough passer, somebody who can run that part of the offense, rebounds at a high level, can score, can definitely step out and hit threes. He shot about 35% last year, can bang down low, get to the foul line, had a high shot rate, high usage rate, really, really strong rebounder. And he did have an assist rate of 18.5% last season. So look for Mast to fill that Derek Walker role, and that means he's going to have a lot of viability for DFS purposes, no doubt. And then Jerron Coleman comes in from Ball State. Coleman, somebody who also shot the ball fairly decently, right around 35-36%, averaged almost 14 points per game, 5 rebounds, 4 assists. Contributor, somebody who can fill a role like a Sam Griesel type. So I do like the talent they brought in here. They do return Juwan Gary. Let's get him healthy because Juwan Gary has a lot of bounce. Love Juwan Gary. Before he got injured last year, he looked like he had the potential to be one of the best players on this team and a potential, like second or third all Big Ten type performer pre-injury. And he was looking like a non-con hero. I explained the non-con hero philosophy on one of the previous shows this week, but I think he would have really produced at the conference level as well. CJ Wilcher back, not the best shooter. CJ Wilcher, I expected a lot more from him at this point. Perhaps he finally figures it out, but there are so many other guys they brought in that are going to play over him. I don't see the consistent minutes for him to really matter. Jamarquez Lawrence, young, shoots about 38% from long range, somebody who's going to be able to handle the rock a little bit. He is certainly a guy to pay attention to for the future. And now we'll see what kind of price we're talking about on Lawrence, but I do think he's going to be a lot better than people realize. And then Kasai Tamanega, over 40% from long range. People love Kasai. He had these games where he's shooting, from Steph Curry parking lot range. They're already, in Nebraska practices. There was a Bryce Williams interview that I watched earlier today, actually, talking about Kasai range, and the kid's going to just be firing. So I have a feeling he's going to come out and be super priced up to the point where it's going to be uncomfortable to pay, this like 8K price for him. I think that'll be hard for me to justify, but I know people are going to do it. And he's going to have these games where he rattles off 30 real points. It's going to happen. So I like him just like everybody else, but I'm not as enamored with him as others. I would love to see redshirt freshman Ramel Lloyd really step up and get a chance to play big minutes this year. I don't know that he will. Again, there's guys over him like Juwan Gary, Rink Mast, Bryce Williams, so it seems like it's going to be hard for him to get minutes. But he does have potential coming out of high school. He had a lot of upside, just didn't work out quite yet. Keeping an eye on him. And then Aaron Eulis transferred in from Iowa, but the scandal, Iowa betting on games and doing all that, he was a big part of that. So it seems highly unlikely that he's actually going to play this year. So we'll watch out for that. But that would have been even more of a logjam at the guard spot, wing spots for this Nebraska team. So it's not necessarily a bad thing from a fantasy perspective that he sits out this year. So that's pretty much the Nebraska team. I think people are going to overlook them. I've also, just to kind of hammer the Bryce Williams play, there's been talks of him running some point this year as well, kind of a bigger wing. But if he's handling the rock and running the offense, man, there's going to be just magnificent upside for Bryce Williams. So love what I'm seeing out of him. All right, Penn State Nittany Lions, the first-year coach for Mike Rhodes brings in a bunch of his kids from VCU, former VCU coach. This is a Penn State program that exceeded all expectations last year under Micah Shrewsbury, who is off to Notre Dame now. The team is going to look just about completely different, though, right? Seth Lundy, Jalen Pickett, Andrew Funk, Cameron Winter, Miles Dredd, Kevin Ajay, all of those guys gone, either no more eligibility or transferred out. They were an older veteran team, which is why they were able to kind of beat up on some of the younger squads and actually eked out a better than expected season. And when you look at their roster this year and the guys that Rhodes brought over with him, it's kind of the blueprint left by Shrewsbury. They've brought in transfers who are familiar not only with themselves and their coach, but they're upperclassmen, know what it takes to win at this collegiate level, and aren't going to shrivel up in the moment. Bringing in Ace Baldwin from VCU, that's huge. Baldwin, to me, is going to be that Jalen Pickett role. Now, Jalen Pickett had games where flirted with a triple-double. He got to be super expensive, but he was putting up these 40, 50 fantasy point games. I don't know that Ace Baldwin will do that, but he certainly has the upside to do so because he has a fantastic assist rate. He has a magnificent steal rate. He can score. He can shoot. He can do a lot of things, and he's going to have the ball in his hands a lot. So you have to really like Ace Baldwin and what he's going to do for this Penn State program. Also brings his buddy Nick Kern, who's another pretty solid defender. Doesn't shoot particularly well. We'll have to work on his offense, but he brings a lot to the table on defense, which will get him minutes there for sure. A couple of North Carolina transfers on this Penn State group, Puff Johnson and DeMarco Dunn, both highly rated recruits coming out, just didn't get the opportunity. North Carolina really didn't do a very good job under Hubert Davis utilizing their bench and developing second-tier players. Starters were fine. If they were good already, then they were fine for Hubert, but he just didn't seem to develop these guys. I'm not giving up on Puff Johnson yet. I think he can develop himself into a solid enough three-point shooter. I think he can defend well enough in this conference to get big minutes, and I think he sees overall minutes, points, rebounds, rates, everything go up this year for Puff Johnson. I'm very, very much interested in him and still very, very high on Puff Johnson, probably to a fault, but I'm not ready to give up on this kid, and I'm excited to see what he can do. DeMarco Dunn, to a lesser extent, another kid who really tore it up at the high school level, Hasn't been able to show it just yet. Should have the opportunity to play minutes and contribute right away, and be kind of the second tier off the bench, scoring type guard that these veteran teams need, or these teams that make these March runs have to rely on. So DeMarco Dunn is a very gifted, or you haven't seen it yet, but he is a gifted scorer, and he has a variety of moves. Hopefully we'll get a chance to see that. I'm looking forward to him as well. There's a lot of pecking order stuff that we're going to have to see with this team. They do bring in a Temple player by the name of Zach Hicks. Decent enough shooter, decent enough rebounder. He's going to contribute. He scored kind of like a streaky type of scorer, somebody who plays this finesse forward type of role that I think will work in this system as long as he can defend. That is an important piece to Coach Rhodes' system. Raquandis Mitchell transfers in from UMKC, averaged over 17 points per game. He's going to be an instant offense type of guy, whether that's off the bench or if they do decide to start him maybe next to Ace Baldwin. There's a lot of guys on this team who are going to be plus defenders, but offensively challenged. So Raquandis Mitchell, I think, was an important get for them because he's going to be able to offer a lot of upside. And if they get stagnant or they need a bucket, they can turn to him for that. Other transfers, Leo O'Boyle from Lafayette and Quetus Wahab from Georgetown. Wahab's been around the block to Georgetown to Maryland to Georgetown to now Penn State. He is a grad transfer, so he should not have to deal with any waiver stuff. Averaged 9.7 rebounds a year ago. Good post player, not great by any means, doesn't do anything particularly exceptional, but he is a guy that can fill a role for this team and play, relatively high minutes. Leo Boyle, on the other hand, not much of a banger, but he can knock down threes with the best of them. Early in the season, let's go to Lafayette's team page. Early in the season last year, Leo Boyle was a guy that we were using quite frequently. They had games against St. John's, Miami, St. Joseph's, teams that, they obviously struggled with, but he was actually a viable option and somebody that produced like 14, 3 and 4, with 2 steals against St. John's. He was like a 4.7K type of option, but he always came to play and he contributed in all categories and he wasn't afraid to shoot, and the green light for him to shoot. Now, Lafayette played Penn State last year, gave them a chance to see Leo. In that game, he scored 19 points, knocked down 4 triples, had 3 steals, over 20 fantasy points. He was somebody who definitely wasn't afraid of the upper tier competition and played really well. So he is going to have a role on this team as well. And again, a team with a ton of plus defenders, but maybe lackluster offense can definitely use a guy like Leo O'Boyle. Primary returners, not a lot of them. Kanye Clary, really it. He's going to be a guy that they're going to focus on a lot beyond just this year. Really the only returner, as I mentioned, 3.7 points per game, and that's the highest point total for any returner to this Penn State team. He's very fast. He's very electric, dynamic. I feel like he could have a possible breakout. He's not my pick for the big breakout, but it's going to come down to how well he can defend in this system. But Rhodes does play a style that, get up and down, leads to fantasy points, steals into points, into dunks, into alley-oops and assists and all that good stuff. So there's a role here for Clary somewhere, and we'll see how well he can defend right away, and that's going to determine how many minutes he actually gets. Moving right along here, let's go to Northwestern, the Wildcats. 11th season for Chris Collins. They do lose Chase Oddish. That's a big one, 14 points per game. Robbie Barron and Julian Roper. Relatively, strong options or the nucleus for this team. But, Boo Boo, he comes back after averaging 17 points per game, shot 32% from long range. Now, you know the story by now when it comes to Boo Boo. If you don't, you should know. He has the absolute highest upside of anyone else in this conference. When he's on point, he is really a big-time slate breaker, capable of hanging 40 on anyone. But the problem is he also can have these stretches where he has 1 fantasy point in 22 minutes. You guys know from rostering Boo Booey over the last couple of years, and he's been around for a while now, how much he can disappear and how frustrating that is. But every year since right after COVID, he's improved in free throw rate, free throw shooting, his assist rate, his shot rate, his usage rate, his rebounding rate, his steals rate, fouls drawn rate. So everything improving for him. Another chance to come here and end his legacy for Northwestern, perhaps taking them to another tournament. They won that game against Boise State, pushed UCLA to the brink. This is a team that people need to give more credit to, probably, because I think a lot of people are going to overlook them. Oh, they lost Chase Oddish. Like, what are they going to do? Well, they do bring in some pretty solid transfers for all around. Let's first continue to talk about the returners. So Bowie, the top option. Ty Berry still around. Ty Berry, another streaky shooter. Only shot 29% from long range, but I think he's probably one of the better 29% three-point shooters if you can fathom or wrap your mind around that. Another guy who can hang 30 but can disappear and put up 5. I had him in Dynasty for several years. Trust me, I know a lot about Ty Berry and how frustrating he can be. Brooks Barnheiser's back, shot 31% from long range. He is due to take another step forward. The 7-footer Matthew Nicholson, solid rebounder, can score down low, will be counted on to play more minutes, no doubt about it. The transfers that come in, Blake Preston from Liberty, my guy Ryan Langborg from Princeton, who during the tournament last year did have a Posh Play of the Day designation and did come through for us in a big way. We'll talk about that in a second. And Justin Mullins transfers in from Denver. Now, Blake Preston, mostly a role player for Liberty, been around a while, gave them solid minutes, had moments where he could take over, but mostly faded in the background because of those Liberty guards and how good Darius McThree was. I think he fits into this roster really well. If Matthew Nicholson can't get going or Brooks Barnheiser has a setback, they can plug Blake Preston in and he can give them minutes. It doesn't always necessarily translate to actual stats, fantasy points, which is what we need, but he isn't a liability too much for this team either. Justin Mullins on Denver shot 37% from long range, just about 10 points, 3 rebounds. That's just a guy that's going to give them some shooting opportunities, and that's really going to be what is making this team successful, because Boo Boo is going to do a lot of driving, a lot of getting the foul line, and needs to be able to kick out to some of these three-point shooters. That brings us to Ryan Langborg, who averaged right around 13 points per game and played on that Princeton team that went to the Sweet 16. He is a dagger shooter. Volume, his percentages won't show him as some sort of like elite three-point shooter, but if you watched games, you saw Ryan Langborg at Princeton and came away from their games thinking, wow, this is the best kid on the court. The game against Arizona, they gutted that one out. He had 8 points in that one, but the way he carried himself, it kind of was infectious to the rest of the team. Tosin Nebuam was really good against them. Langborg gave them 31 minutes. He took a ton of shots. Now, he was breaking threes, but he impacted the game elsewhere. He was actually blocking shots as well as a 6'4" guy in the perimeter getting blocks. Now, the game against Missouri is where it really got fun. That was the one they beat them 78-63, and Langborg got pretty hot from 3, hit 4, but the big thing was he took a ton of shots, almost 20, 22 real points, 6 rebounds, 4 assists, and that was the Posh Play of the game, or Posh Play of the Day game that he performed there. Really think he's going to be able to give a lot to this Northwestern team, and I think he's going to play a ton of minutes. During his run at Princeton, averaged right around 30, 31 minutes. I could see that kind of going into the mid-30s range, 34, 35, and playing most of the game with Boo Boo at this point. So I have very high hopes for Ryan Langborg, and I think he's going to be a very nice piece here, because looking at this Northwestern team, offensively, they look like they could be a little bit challenged. It depends. With Mullins being a three-point shooter, but coming from Denver, you don't know how these guys can respond or how they'll do in the up transfers, especially going to a physical conference like the Big Ten. All right, next team we're going to talk about the Rutgers Scarlet Knights. No more Caleb McConnell. no more Cam Spencer, and no more Paul McCahey, because, of course, Paul McCahey going to my Washington Huskies. We're excited about it. But they do return Cliff Omarui, who basically averaged a double-double last year. Good shot blocker, real excellent, I should say, shot blocker. Very good low post scorer. The main complaint that we have with Cliff is that he's not always aggressive, doesn't always look to take over games in the post. Sometimes the guards with Spencer and McCahey and Derek Simpson to a lesser extent, they're taking shot after shot, and Cliff really needed to step up and call for the ball and work these posts, because when you got the ball down low, he generally scored. He just wasn't getting that many opportunities, and that was very frustrating. He returns. Andre Hyatt returns. Moat Mag. Both of those guys are very athletic, versatile options. Derek Simpson is the crown jewel breakout candidate extraordinaire. I feel very good about Derek Simpson. We saw plenty of times last year, especially late into March, February, March, where he was able to take over games as a freshman. And now you've got McConnell, McCahey, all these guys gone. He's going to play a huge, huge role, going from 20 minutes a game last year to probably somewhere between 33, 34 minutes this year. I'd be very, very shocked if he didn't play majority of the game a lot of times at Rutgers is in close games. Very good at getting the foul line. Very good at generating offense. Needs to work on his three-point shooting. If he can develop as a three-point shooter and really, at least raise his percentage from low 20s to low 30s, for example, it gets really dangerous, because he's able to take a lot of defenders one-on-one off the dribble. And if he can prevent them from sagging off by hitting, at least, like I said, low 30s, even upper 20s, he becomes a very dangerous option. So we're excited about Derek Simpson, most definitely. They do bring in the freshman Gavin Griffiths, expected to be a big-time player. The summer trips that they took, mainly to Portugal, he was a big-time player, did very well for them. Very positive reports about Gavin Griffiths, who's going to step in and play a big role for this team immediately. UMass transfer Noah Fernandez just gives them point guard help if Simpson needs to play off the ball, can kind of, coexist together. Doesn't need to score to be effective, can just run the offense, can calm things down when it needs to. And he can also shoot threes when he needs to as well. Shot 45% from long range last year, but it was on a lot less games because of an injury, so he missed a lot of the season. They also bring in a grad transfer from Hartford, Austin Williams. Austin Williams been around for a while, played at FIU as well. Hartford did not do anyone any justice. The way that they did away with their program was pretty sad. They had a really good team. They made the tournament one year. They had a great program. I just, that Hartford, the way their AD and stuff did them was very sad. But Austin Williams can definitely play. He can score. I feel like he's somebody who could end up competing for a starting gig. Right around 31% three-point shooter, but he averaged 16 points per game last year, over 33 minutes, higher usage rate, decent assist rate, averaged over 5 rebounds per game. Had to do a little bit of everything for that team, but he's somebody that I feel like can be inserted and play fairly big minutes right away if they need him. And they will, definitely. Other guys that return, Antoine Woolfolk, Antonio Chol, Oscar Palmquist, all guys who can fill a off-the-bench role, playing minutes, not really viable unless there were, God forbid, an injury to Clifford Omarui or somebody like Moat Mag. Now, Jeremiah Williams also transferring in from Iowa State Temple, but the dreaded waiver of doom there, so we'll see what happens with Jeremiah. I don't know. I think this Rutgers team, it's another one of those people, or another one of those programs that I think people are overlooking. I see a couple of preseason Big Ten predictions, and they're on the bottom of a lot of people's. So we'll see what happens there. Jeremiah Williams in the gambling like Aaron Eulis, so that's a big negative knock against him. So that's why he probably isn't playing, right? But I think they have enough at all these other positions. Derek Simpson, obvious breakout candidate. Austin Williams, sneaky option. And then the freshman there, Gavin Griffiths, playing multiple positions is going to be a fun play. All right, Michigan Wolverines. I am not a fan of Michigan whatsoever. Juwan Howard has done a pretty horrific job. Losing Hunter Dickinson, it was obvious it was going to happen, but it still hurts them, right? Jet Howard gone, Joey Baker gone, Kobe Buffkin gone. Now they do bring in a boatload of transfers, but none of them super intriguing to me, at least initially. And they're guys that I like. Namari Burnett from Alabama, who I was constantly trying to use as a value last year, can hardly ever stay healthy, suffered some big injuries, but a really gifted scorer at the high school level, and coming up, he was expected to be a big time performer for Bama, and it just didn't. Texas, the Texas Tech, it just didn't work out because of these injuries. Trey Jackson transfers in from Seton Hall, and then Oliver Mkwa from Tennessee. Oliver Mkwa comes into the best situation because he's going to be able to take those Hunter Dickinson minutes right away, those touches, those shots. He can shoot from long range a little bit, 33%. Expect him to average, something like 14, 15 points, 7 to 8 rebounds, and be an adequate option. My concern there is that, he's priced up out of play where it just doesn't make sense to use him, but he's going to definitely be a factor for this team. And there were a lot of upper tier programs trying to get him out of the portal. So, it's obvious his role is solid here and set. Now, I love Terrace Reed. You guys know Terrace Reed was a sneak play. He was even Posh Play of the Day once or twice last year. Former top 50 kid. Look for him to probably be a starter from day one. Hopefully, Howard allows him to play through some mistakes because he is still a little bit raw, but a very versatile, elite rim protector type of upside. I think Reed and Mkwa together has potential to be exciting, but the rest of this roster, it's really tough. They do bring back Doug McDaniel. They do bring back Terrence Williams, Will Schwetter, who a lot of people were trying to make a thing last year, Yusuf Kayat. So there is some and Jace Howard. So there are some familiar names returning. Doug McDaniel running the point, probably the most well-known, I think, at this point for DFS players, and probably the name that most expect to be the one that gets rostered the most from this team as well. Jalen Llewellyn, who transferred over from Princeton a season ago and went down very early with an injury that caused him to miss out the season and allowed him to play another year, is still around. So I don't know that Doug McDaniel steps into a role where he's playing 38 minutes a game, but Llewellyn, could potentially take a starting gig away from him, depending on if he's effective or not. Llewellyn's going to play enough minutes off the bench initially in the 20s that it kind of makes me a little leery of going all in on a player like Doug McDaniel. So I do think that those guys end up kind of cannibalizing each other. Namari Burnett's going to have to step up and be a big-time scorer, has to stay healthy. So I'll be really watching out for that because I am a Namari Burnett fan. And then Trey Jackson, who never really stepped out for Seton Hall and showed himself to be a consistent scoring option. He's going to have to be that for Michigan here. So there are going to be some guys on this Michigan team that are cheap and will probably fall into a lot of minutes, but I think we might see a little bit of a juggling rotation here from Coach Howard, at least initially. All right, we will move on. Let's talk about the Iowa Hawkeyes. Now, our Discord has many Iowa fans, so we got to talk good about Fran McCaffrey's bunch. He's been there for 14 years. Chris Murray's gone, so the Murray brothers' legacy is out. Philip Racha, who was a posh play of the day many times himself, he's gone. Connor McCaffrey gone, and then of course Aaron Eulis transferring out as well. They do bring in some transfers. Evan Browns from Belmont and Ben Cricky from Valparaiso. Ben Cricky is the one that most people are excited about. Averaged 19-6 a season ago for a Valparaiso program that wasn't when we were kids with the Bryce Drew shot. They weren't that level, but they definitely had some moments. They were horrible on defense. Cricky had any shot he wanted to take, played on a team with Kobe King. Of course, Kobe King transferred from Wisconsin to play on Valparaiso, and those two just basically took every single shot. Did have volume on threes over 50, but he only shot 27%. But he did have a high block rate, had a high shot rate. His true shooting percentage, top 150 in the country, and shot about 80% from the foul line when he got himself there, and he took a ton of free throws, the most on the team, over 140. So there's a lot of people who feel like he'll step into a big role here, and he probably will put up some pretty solid numbers, similar scoring-wise to Philip Rabracha, but he's not the same type of rebounder, so I don't know what to expect just yet for him on the rebounding side of things here on a program such as Iowa and in the conference that is the Big Ten, but he's certainly going to step in and play minutes. Evan Brown's a role player, averaged 7 and 5 a year ago for Belmont. Key returners, Peyton Sandfort shot 34% from long range, Patrick McCaffrey 34%, and Tony Perkins 33%. Also DeSante Bowen, who shot 36%. So there's some shooters on this team that can definitely stretch the floor. Sandfort's brother Price comes in. Price Sandfort arguably could be better than Peyton. Very, very quick. I think he's somebody we want to absolutely pay attention to. I think this team, with the way they typically play, it usually leads to high scoring affairs. It usually leads to 3-4 players going well above 5x. As I guess unexciting as Iowa usually is, especially for football, when it comes to basketball, they're a team we're going to have to pay a lot of attention to for DFS purposes. Perkins is probably the number one fantasy option on this team just because he will have the ability to run the offense. He can play off the ball as well. He can make things happen. He can take games over with his scoring, can defend a little bit. Peyton Sandfort a little more limited in that regard, relies more on his shooting, but he's definitely a guy who can get hot in a hurry. I'm really interested in DeSante Bowen. I think he has a chance to really step forward and establish himself as an important piece. And then Josh Dix, another sophomore who wasn't particularly useful last year, but has some upside and somebody who can also, like I said, shoot the ball. Turnovers were an issue for him, but he can definitely earn minutes if he can defend, keep those turnovers down, and hit shots. Just a lot of potential cheapies for this Iowa team that I think can have viability. Price Sandfort, though, I think he's going to make Peyton look. I mean, Peyton's good at shooting and is good. Don't get me wrong, but Price, man, I think he's going to be very, very solid, and I think he'll force his way into minutes by midseason. I don't think Price is going to play a big role initially, but there's just a lot of options on this Iowa team, and typically a deeper Iowa team, while still fun for DFS purposes, leads to more frustrations than not. So we'll have to see how the pecking order is established as we get into conference play. But this team has the look of a very, very deep program. All right, Wisconsin Badgers. Let's talk about Wisconsin. Jordan Davis gone. He's no Johnny Davis. It's tough to live in the shadow of your brother when he's that good. They do have a replacement in AJ Storr transferring in from St. John's. It was surprising when Coach Pitino takes over the St. John's program. He didn't attempt to try to keep AJ Storr. Pretty much ushered everybody out the door and only wanted to keep Joel Soriano. I think Storr steps into an excellent opportunity here. We saw Storr. Once he got minutes at St. John's, he certainly looked the part, shot 41% from long range, was able to play 25 plus minutes, really got over the initial, freshman wall that guys typically hit and became a very key piece to that program. Now, I know they only ended up 18 and 15, fizzled out there because, Mike Anderson is Mike Anderson, but it was no fault of AJ Storr, who shot almost 100 threes in conference play, shot 39%, top 10 shooter in the Big East. His shot rate rose to 23% in conference play. Started to defend a little bit, had a higher block rate in conference play. Somebody who's going to play a huge role and could have a Johnny Davis-esque ascension into a big-time 8K type of player and putting up an 8K type of stat line. So AJ Storr is certainly the guy to watch here. They do bring back the versatile jack of all trades, Tyler Wald. Now, last year was weird because without Davis, it was like, oh my God, we're paying 7.5, 8K for Wall. But early in the season, he was putting up 35 to 40 fantasy points. Now, he won't have to do as much on the scoring side. And you saw he started to struggle in terms of his ability to score. So having AJ Storr is going to be really important and it's going to take a lot of pressure off of him. They do bring back the three-point shooter in Max Klesmit, shot about 38%. Our guy Connor SCN, he shot about 36%. Expect him to take a nice step forward. Connor and AJ, those two guys being sophomores, youngsters together, that's the future of Wisconsin basketball there. Although Storr, if he ascends as high as Johnny Davis did, he could be calling for, or the NBA could be calling him at the end of the season. And then Chucky Hepburn, who did develop himself into a 41% three-point shooter. Very hard to trust him because of consistency issues, but he's definitely going to play a lot of minutes and facilitate and run this offense. And then you have Steven Crowell, 7-footer, 12.7 rebounds a season ago, shot about 31% from long range. Definitely can compete on both sides of the ball. And then Carter Gilmore, who was an okay value. As pricing tightened last year, you could talk yourself into Gilmore because he played about 20, 21 minutes. Not exciting by any means, but certainly a guy who has usefulness and will probably play maybe even a little bit more this year. They brought in a bunch of freshmen who are going to take time. So I think we could see Gilmore be, first or second guy off the bench with regularity. And Kamari McGee returns as well after barely playing many minutes, only 7 a year ago. But I think Kamari McGee is somebody who could eventually earn more playing time. At least he showed it in lower major programs to a degree. Moving right along here, let's go to Ohio State. The Buckeyes, they have lost Bryce Sensabaugh, Justice Suing finally out of there, Sean McNeil, Isaac Kelly. A lot of production gone, but the Ohio State team, even with Sensabaugh, they just weren't that exciting last year. They certainly had valuable members for DFS purposes, but I don't like the way Chris Holtmann runs that team. They do bring in a crop of freshmen from Scotty Middleton, who has a ton of upside, to Devin Royal, who is getting a ton of hype. Transfer-wise, Dale Bonner, more of a role player coming in from Baylor. Jamison Battle, who we talked about, was at Minnesota, had the green light to shoot at Minnesota. Will he have the green light to shoot at Ohio State? I think he will initially, but they'll have to reel him in. And then Evan Mahaffey transfers in from Penn State, somebody who can give them solid defensive minutes and contribute, but isn't a great DFS performer. Does shoot 33% from long range, but I don't know how many minutes he could actually have here. Bruce Thornton returns for year 2, solidly going to be running the point. Love Bruce Thornton. I think he has a chance to be really good. Shot about 37% from long range. Really worked himself into a reliable option. It was funny because Thornton was the one that people talked about coming in. Sensabaugh was actually the stud. And then once he started faltering a little bit, Thornton became a more consistent option. Had less highs, had less lows, but was a consistent option. Roddy Gale returns, shooting 43% from long range, and Felix Okpara, who will have to take a step forward this year, the almost 7-footer, gave us some good minutes whenever Zed Key went down. Speaking of which, Zed Key is back. Expect him to flirt with a double-double with regularity. That is a really solid nucleus that they have. If Scotty Middleton and Devin Royal can be as good as people say, they have a really nice 8-9 man rotation that is going to absolutely compete for a tournament berth and give people a lot of fits. They also have Tayson Chapman, who's coming in, the number 32 ranked recruit as a point guard. But he's, compared to Royal and Middleton, who are ranked a little bit lower, he has less chance to a prominent role because I think Thornton is just solidified, and it would take a injury for him to really kind of, step in there and take any significant minutes. Moving on here, let's talk about the Maryland Terrapins, the Terps. Now, Kevin Willard did solid, got them to the tournament right away. I think he is going to have Maryland doing good things again this year. Now, they do lose role players, Don Carey, Ian Martinez, and Patrick Emelim. They do lose Hakeem Hart to Villanova, but they bring in some really strong freshmen and a couple of transfers that are going to fill a role for this team. Before we get into the newcomers, though, we have to talk about what's returning. Jameer Young, who was fantastic last year, averaged 16 points per game, 5 rebounds, 3 assists. Getting him back is just going to be huge. Maryland, when they're at their best, regardless of who's coached them throughout the decades, they have a lead guard who's absolutely phenomenal on the offensive end. And when you need a basket, you can turn to this player. Now, over the years, was it Juan Dixon, Steve Francis, Cowan? There's just been a ton of guards that have done good for this. Grievous Vasquez, and it's Jameer Young this time. And his scoring actually may take a slight hit considering who they have coming in, but he's still going to be a phenomenal performer and somebody that we can use with confidence. It took people a while to come around to Jameer Young last year, especially because pricing wise, he came up with 7K, 8K, and people were just writing him off right away, but he absolutely paid that price off more often than not. Just taking a cheap peek at the chat there, answering fantasy football questions. If you're looking for college, I don't really do the NFL stuff, so I apologize. There is a lot of NFL content coming out, and I believe there's actually another show on the FTN Network right now that is covering some NFL stuff. So if that's what you're looking for, apologize. We are not doing that here, but we will have college football show on Thursday night, 9 p.m. PST, if that's your thing. Dante Scott returns, been around a while. Solid rebounder, big-time contributor. Price is the big thing on Dante Scott. He tends to be really chalky because for a while he was stuck in this like mid 6K range, and he just always churned out 4X, 4X, 4X. For me, when he's chalk and he's in that 7K range, I tend to lean off of him because he does get a little erratic. But he's absolutely in his fifth year going to be a guy that Willard's relying on heavily. But I think his numbers take a slight hit because Julian Reese has to take another step forward. I loved Julian Reese in his freshman season. I could see something really good from him. And I love the fact that he stepped up last year and absolutely exploded. Averaged 12 points a game, 7 rebounds. You look at these efficiency rates. Let's pop this up real quick. Reese ended up turning himself in. And you could argue that Jameer Young's presence really helped him, and it did. But he went from a unreliable fouling machine to a super reliable, consistent fouling machine. So the fouls are the big thing that still hurt him, but his true shooting percentage went up by a ton. His rebounding rate went from about 28% combined to almost 35% combined. Block rate went up. He had the 6th best block rate in the conference at 5.2%. Drew over 5 fouls per 40. Had a top 10 free throw rate in the country. Didn't particularly shoot very well at the foul line, 53%, which that's obviously going to have to improve. He shot 81% the year before on 51 attempts, 53% on 137 a year later. He's going to get hacked a lot this year, and he has to prove that he can make free throws, but he's not afraid to bang down low. He didn't shoot a single 3 this past season. That was something. He shot 30% the year before. Would like to see him develop more on that side of things to really make himself a versatile option. But as far as true postman goes, Julian Reese, and he's a little undersized at 6'9", 6'10". He is a absolute specimen. I'm really excited about him this year. If he can stay out of foul trouble, there is truly limitless upside for him. And we're talking about a guy who could easily average 30, 35 fantasy points per game, if not more. I think the ticket this year and what Willard will be looking for is less Young having to put the team on his back to score points. I mean, that's going to happen, right? And more facilitating, getting Reese involved, pulling Scott out of these inconsistent, lulls that he goes into. But Reese is going to have to be able to knock down jump shots. That's a big thing for him. And I do think he's going to have another leap forward. Very excited about him. Other returners, Noah Batchelor coming in as kind of a wing second-year player. Going to have to be able to shoot a little bit better than the 26% he shot last year, but he's definitely got upside. And then a role player in Jari Long. The newcomers that they bring in definitely are intriguing. Jordan Geronimo from Indiana, Chance Stevens from Loyola Marymount. Stevens about a 38% three-point shooter, just strictly coming in to help with that, but he's young. It's only going to be technically his second year. They can develop him, work him in, improve him on defense, and can become a contributor and somebody who, as far as role-playing bench pieces go, better than Ian Martinez. Like that, if that's the bar, we got a good chance of Chance Stevens being much better than Ian Martinez. Jordan Geronimo had some really nice games last year, especially when Trace Jackson Davis was hurt. I like him coming over to Maryland. I think he's probably going to miss out on some minutes initially, but he's certainly going to play more of a consistent role and be relied upon more than he was at Indiana. And it wouldn't even be shocking to see if Geronimo started. That's a real good possibility. Matty Schroer transfers in from New Mexico State as well, somebody who could potentially be a lower post starter as well. So there's some nice pieces for this Maryland team, but we can't forget about the two main freshmen. They have a few coming in. Braden Pierce, who's a 7-footer, Jonathan Lamoth, who's a decent enough guard, but there's two in particular that I'm very excited about, and that's Jamie Kaiser, 6'6" wing, and Deshaun Harris-Smith, 6'4" guard. Deshaun Harris-Smith is going to be that next guard in line. So Jameer Young, this will be his final season when he's gone. Assuming Harris-Smith doesn't just go gangbusters and end up getting drafted after 1 year, this is going to be the next in line for great Maryland guards. He looks phenomenal. It will not surprise me one bit if he becomes a instant obviously starter, but instant DFS play where we're like, okay, 5K Deshaun Harris-Smith, plug him in. 6K Deshaun Harris-Smith, we're plugging him in. 7K Deshaun Harris-Smith, we're plugging him in. Like, it's going to take a very high price, I think, for us to get away from him. He is a freaking awesome player. His style is going to have to change a little bit. He's going to have to become a better shooter. But the nice thing is that Maryland and Coach Willard have done a nice job bringing in solid shooters around him. Harris-Smith's game is to drive to the basket, generate points at the free throw line, and kind of just gets to the hoop whenever he wants. And he's going to be a guy that just plays bully ball as a guard. And it reminds me, and I'm not suggesting that he's this guy, but that style of guard play reminds me a lot of Gary Payton. Of course, I'm from Seattle originally. Watched a lot of Sonics growing up. Gary Payton had that. He'd post up smaller guards, and he would just bully them into the post. And I think we could see Deshaun Harris-Smith have a really fun season and be able to learn from Young and a couple of other guys on this team. Shooting definitely what he needs to improve upon. And then Jamie Kaiser, he is a much better shooter than Deshaun Harris-Smith. So again, they've done a nice job surrounding shooters. Kaiser, somebody who, if given the green light, won't be afraid to shoot. Kind of reminds me of Ryan Langborg in that regard. Just going to chuck, and kind of plays an old school style. So those two freshmen are certainly worth paying attention to. They're going to be in this rotation immediately. All right, let's move on to Geronimo's old team here. Coach Mike Woodson and the Indiana Hoosiers. Woodson already in his third season. It's crazy how fast time goes. Race Thompson finally out of eligibility. Trace Jackson Davis in the NBA. Jalen Hood Shafino, the freshman phenom, is gone. Miller Kopp and Tamar Bates, role players, also gone. But they did a nice job. They bring in Peyton Sparks, a solid low post presence from Ball State. Anthony Walker from Miami, Florida. Walker, a role player the last season or two, but in his early freshman and sophomore seasons, he was actually putting up 20 fantasy point games with regularity. Don't know why he wasn't getting more minutes in the latter part of his career, but somebody who could step into this Indiana program and be a much more viable fantasy option than people probably realize. Also, Kel Ware gets a chance to restart after kind of fizzling out at Oregon last year. And then Mackenzie Mbako, who originally was going to go to Duke, looked like he might go to St. John's, and ends up going to Indiana. However, he was just in trouble for not wanting to leave the drive-through line of Taco Bell. Not really going to get into all that. I don't know that it's going to cost him any time, but there is that potential drama leaning over his head. Returner Xavier Johnson, if he can stay healthy. Xavier Johnson's been around a whole hell of a long time, gets another medical waiver after being injured. You just hope Xavier can make it through a full season. And Indiana obviously hopes he can make it through a full season because a healthy, fully stacked up Xavier Johnson is a very good guard, and he's an upperclassman that knows how to run the offense, knows how to win games, and is going to be a very important piece to this program, especially with all these youngsters potentially in the lineup. Kel Ware, Mackenzie Mbako, Malik Renew in his second season, who's going to be able to take a lot of that Trace Jackson Davis usage. All young front court players that are going to need Xavier Johnson to be a leader for them. I like what they did with Peyton Sparks and Anthony Walker because they're upperclassmen that if the moment is too high for Ware, Mackenzie, Renew, those guys can come in and play some minutes and actually, give them that veteran presence that those youngsters sometimes crave. Trey Galloway is a 46% three-point shooter. Very inconsistent. Galloway's a guy who always like 3K min price. It's like you can talk yourself into him like you could with Miller Kopp, but he just doesn't offer a whole hell of a lot. I'm a little bit still leery on him, but looking at the guards on this roster, he will be forced to play a very big role. Unless a player like a CJ Gunn or an Anthony Leal, also cheap guys at the guard spots, take a big step forward. Leal is being a senior now, Gunn a sophomore, still room and upside for him. We'll see how that shakes out, but the guards for this Hoosiers team definitely leave a little bit something to, a lot of room for improvement when it comes to the guards. I do think their front court is stacked up with young talent that is going to be tough. And if they can get good guard play and keep their guards healthy, then they'll certainly be a strong group. And a lot of this is going to depend on Xavier Johnson, who is technically in his 6th season because of that medical red shirt. If he at all has any, re-aggravations or new injuries, it's going to be very, very tough. The youngsters that come in at the guard spot, Gabe Cupps and Ja'Kai Newton, could be forced into minutes if that does happen. All right, let's go to the Illinois Fighting Illini. I have several Illinois fans that are in our Discord and have followed the Super Show for many years, so I don't want to get myself in trouble with them, but Brad Underwood is not a very good coach. And I can say that. I feel like I'm an expert on what is not a good coach because of who my coach is for my favorite team, the Huskies, and Mike Hopkins. Brad Underwood's adjustments irritate the hell out of me. His rotations irritate the hell out of me, and sometimes I just wonder what the hell he's even doing. No more Matthew Mayer, no more Sky Clark, Jaden Epps, and RJ Melendez all gone. Just like everybody else, they hit the transfer portal hard. They bring in the timeless Quincy Guerrier, who is somehow still in college from Oregon, used to play at Syracuse as well. Marcus Domask from Southern Illinois, who a lot of people are excited about. See how he plays at this level. And Justin Harmon, who came from that very fun Mark Madsen coached Utah Valley team. A couple of freshmen, Draw Gibbs Lawhorn and Amani Hansberry. The returners, Dane Danger. You guys know I love my Dane Danger. I think he takes a nice step forward. Fouls the main issue for him, but when he has matchups, he can exploit weaker front courts, poor defenses, poor rebounding clubs. He really can smack he's not his own worst enemy, though, because of the foul trouble that sometimes happens. Coleman Hawkins is back. Needs to improve as a jump shooter, but had shown flashes of breaking the slate last year. We used him a lot when he was cheap. Once he got to a certain price and he kind of got relegated to fourth or fifth option, it became really difficult to justify using him. He's going to have to be more consistent. Ty Rodgers, the biggest breakout candidate on this roster, definitely Ty Rodgers. Terrence Shannon, getting him back was huge for this team. He could potentially, honestly, Terrence Shannon could average 20 points per game this season. He could have a really big year. But I think they're going to want to rely a lot on Ty Rodgers as well and have him continue to develop. So look for Ty Rodgers to go from a 17-minute per game player to probably 30 minutes per game. Sincere Harris, who is a solid defender, shoot the ball a little bit, goes a very long time without fantasy points, has a low fantasy point per minute number. He returns. Luke Good returns as a 42% three-point shooter. Do not sleep on Luke Good if he can get more minutes. And then, of course, like we mentioned, Justin Harmon, who was a 14-point game, 14 points per game scorer, 35% three-point shooter, should step in and play some minutes for this team right away. But I love Ty Rodgers. I think he is really, really good. Probably, there'll be times where Shannon has to run point, but I think Ty Rodgers gets the opportunity to run the offense, and that's going to be really big. He's going to impact the game a lot more that way. His stats are going to take a huge jump in multiple categories, but especially the assist category. His assist rate should spike as he's surrounded by good shooters, and he has interior players who can absolutely put the ball in the hole if given on the block or in a good position to score. So Ty Rodgers, definitely my breakout candidate for this team. And I think Dane Danger could actually probably won't see more than the 20 minutes just because I don't think he can handle big minutes. But I think Dane Danger, with his high fantasy point per minute number, could flirt with a double-double even in that little amount of time. All right, the Purdue Boilermakers, we're getting down to the nitty-gritty here. Matt Painter back for season 19. Brandon Newman and David Jenkins gone. That's okay. Role players at best. Lance Jones, another Southern Illinois player, comes in, and a highly rated, heralded freshman in Miles Colvin, who is going to have to play minutes right away. But the nice thing is bringing in Lance Jones from Southern Illinois, who is a 14-point per game scorer, not the best three-point shooter, but he is a very good defender, can facilitate a little bit, and just does all the little things that you need to win games. That's going to be solid because he'll be able to play next to Fletcher Lawyer, who is a very good scorer, went ice cold after about the first 2 months of the season and became super unreliable, and Braden Smith, who worked himself into a 38% three-point shooter and did have games where, triple doubles weren't that far off. 11 points, 8 rebounds, 7 assists, 15 points, 9 rebounds, 6 assists. He is a very good player running this offense. I like Braden Smith with some of the options that they brought in, which were minor, but also getting to bring back Zach Edey, which is going to be massive. That is going to open up so much because obviously defenses have to collapse. One-on-one, Zach Edey, there's no stopping him. There has to be help, and that leaves somebody open. These guys have to be able to shoot threes. Trey Kaufman-Renn is going to be primed to take a big step forward. Once Edey leaves after this season, Trey Kaufman-Renn is going to be the guy on the low block for this Purdue team. I'm watching him and thinking he could be a starter, take minutes from Mason Gillis perhaps. Mason Gillis returns after being a 36% three-point shooter. Caleb First, who did spot start throughout the course of his career, he hasn't really worked out. He's been a role player. He's not going to impact much. I don't think he's going to be a fantasy option. Kind of the same thing can be said for Ethan Morton, who can't still to this point make threes with regularity, just a bench piece. Same with Brian Waddell, same with Camden Heide. Really brings you to a rotation of about 7 guys, 8 guys. But Miles Colvin, as a freshman, will have to come in and contribute at a high level right away. I think they can get away without throwing him into the fire from day one, right? But he's somebody who is going to be an elite three-point shooter for this team, give them that added element, be able to hit shots out of the double team on passes from Edey, get the table set for him by Braden Smith, and really just contribute as probably like a 5K, 5.5K type piece that we can use. I do think Goldman's going to be real nice. That's pretty much the Purdue run. Obviously, paying up for Zach Edey. You guys know the story on him. If you're watching this, I don't need to explain to you how good Zach Edey is. 50, 60, 70 fantasy points. That's a real possibility with him. Fouls obviously happen, but he's just going to be too good in the non-con. We're going to have to really jam him in and just make it happen. But yeah, I mean, Trey Kaufman-Renn is my breakout candidate from this team and somebody we certainly have to pay attention to. There's going to be upside to use him early in the season, with most people not even knowing who the hell he is. And then that takes us to the Michigan State Spartans, a team that I have, like I said, right when the season ended and DraftKings Sportsbook went in, not far from my house, dangerous. I went and got a ticket on Michigan State just to make the Final Four. It seemed like way too easy. They lose Joey Hauser, which, as a DFS player, fantasy college basketball fan, I'm not too beat up about Joey Hauser being gone. Maybe you guys are, but I'm not. The transfer portal, not really the thing that Tom Izzo hits. He will bring him in from time to time, but generally, obviously with Joey Hauser, but generally he gets his freshmen in there, he develops and he builds his team that way. And he has a very nice freshman class. Garrick Norman, Cohen Carr, Jeremy Fears, and Xavier Booker. Cohen Carr, just a electric athlete, the one that a lot of people are talking about being just a total stud. But the fact of the matter is, Cohen Carr's probably not going to play that many minutes this year. I'm puzzled a little bit because of the way that people talk. To me, Xavier Booker is the freshman to utilize for DFS purposes. Booker is kind of being undervalued a bit, as much as the top, number 15th prospect in the class can be. Comes in as a, just under 7-foot center. Will have to develop, definitely, but he's come to the right program. A coach in Tom Izzo, who's been there for damn near 30 years. Booker will be the next in a long line of Michigan State post players to just absolutely own the collegiate landscape. It's going to take some time, though, with him, and we got to be patient. But I think in the non-con is where we can strike with him. However, because he's the number 14, 15, prospect, depending where you look, DraftKings may just see that and price him at 8K, which in that case, we can't use him. But if he's priced at 4 or 5, if he's priced at even 5K, we can use Booker in the non-con. Just temper expectations with these guys and let others go with Cohen Carr. Like the Cohen Carr hype is nuts. Even like the true Michigan State fan that's plugged in, like they can't help get super excited about Cohen Carr, even though I think most people agree minutes are going to be a little bit tough, even with the Jackson Keeler injury stuff that's coming up there. Looking at the rest of the roster, we have familiar names. We have A.J. Hoggard. We have Tyson Walker, Jaden Akins, Malik Hall, and Matty Sissoko. One thing we can rely on with Coach Izzo is that he's going to play his starters a lot of minutes. Hoggard and Walker both played over 31 minutes per game. Akins just under 30 minutes. Hall and Sissoko over 20, 25 minutes. Sissoko can't handle more than that. He does get into some foul trouble here, but those guys are all going to play hefty minutes. It's going to mean that the freshmen will inevitably have to play some more time out there, and they're going to have to develop to a degree. But we can just keep most of our expectations and our exposure once we get going here to the Michigan State starters. Wanted to pull up here Jackson Keeler. Missed the start of the season, undergoing surgery on his left foot. Right about Christmas return for Jackson Keeler. So that's where in the non-con I'm talking like, hey, we've got an opportunity here for Xavier Booker to get thrust into a bigger role. Hey, Cohen Carr, people think he's going to play more. We'll see. Carson Cooper's still around. We'll see as a role player. Maybe they give Sissoko more minutes. But this roster, we're going to be playing A.J. Hoggard and Tyson Walker a lot. Jaden Akins should take a next step forward. Akins flirted with the NBA, comes back. He's going to play a big role for this team. Even though it's a shorter rotation, the guys they have require shots. So mouths to feed is kind of an issue. because, Walker's going to be shooting a ton. There's games where we've seen Walker take, 10, 11 shots in a row seemingly, and he's that damn good. Shot 41% from long range, but Aiken shot 42% from long range. So look for both of those guys to dominate the offense and the shots. AJ Hoggard setting the table, high assist rate. We know what he's about. Shot about 33% from long range. And then Malik Hall. Malik Hall doesn't get the love that he deserves. Can shoot threes, can rebound, contribute, is a bit streaky at times. Had the minor surgery on his foot as well. But he's somebody that is a really solid option in a Tom Izzo-led offense. Can shoot the hell out of the ball when healthy. It was only a couple seasons ago where he was over 40% from long range. Took a hit last year because he played hurt a lot, but look out for a big, almost semi bounce back season from Blake Hall this year. I'm a big fan of his, and he's usually underpriced, so we'll be able to utilize him a lot. But this is definitely the Aikens, Hoggard, and Walker show here for the most part. All right, that is the conference. We just flew through there. Looking at it, let's give some awards here. Be lazy. I mean, the player of the year is going to be Zach Edey, right? Like, who else would they pick? But to me, I think it's going to be hard for them not to at least vote some Jameer Young. I think what he's going to do for Maryland this year is going to be phenomenal. He's going to morph into a semi-facilitator, but he's still going to have to score as well, and his stats and his safety and his rates are going to be just great. So Zach Edey is the right answer, but I do think Jameer Young deserves some consideration. Coach of the year, I stick around here with Maryland. I think Kevin Willard. I think he's awesome. I think he's a good coach, and I think the Terps are gonna they're gonna be a good team. I think this roster is going to be the ticket for Willard to another tournament here. Defensive player of the year, there's many we could choose from. This is a conference with a lot of solid defenders and guys who can get block shots, guys who can rack up steals. So there's a lot of different options that could win that award, and there's going to be some guys we are fully avoiding when they're on the slate. Hey, they're going to be guarded by this guy, we can't use them. But Zach Edey, 7'4", 7'5" freak of nature that just blocks shots without jumping. As far as newcomer, which could be freshman or transfer, I think for me it has to be AJ Storr. His role on Wisconsin is just going to be of the Johnny Davis variety. He's going to be relied on to shoulder a lot of the offensive load, and it's not as if there aren't other options around him to score. There are, but I think AJ Storr it's going to be silly. If there was a mistake, if you can say a coach like Rick Pitino made a mistake, and who am I to say a Hall of Fame coach can make a mistake, but they might look back and be like, you know what? Probably should have given AJ Storr a compliment during my initial presser instead of only talking about Joel Soriano. AJ Storr should have stayed, because I would not be shocked to see him average 17 points a game and just be a real big-time performer. Breakout candidate, it's the Derek Simpson of Rutgers is going to be phenomenal. He is really, really on my radar, and plenty of others as well, as being just a borderline lock and load without even seeing salary or knowing how the first couple weeks are going to be priced. Probably awful. Simpson's going to be a guy that we're using a lot. So he's my pick to absolutely just shatter, break out, put up huge numbers, and have a very high usage rate for this Rutgers team. And it's fairly obvious that he should, right? Because Rutgers has a lot of offense to replace, and Simpson showed last year, especially late, how good he can actually be. The winner of the conference, Michigan State. I'm not picking Purdue. I think Purdue's fine, but Michigan State, they're going to the Final Four and possibly even winning the whole thing. We'll see. Depends on how these freshmen can get acclimated and really, contribute immediately or if they're just kind of a non-factor. That kind of takes us to the all-conference first team. I don't want to do a second and third team, but just to show you where my head's at. Zach Edey, Jameer Young, AJ Hoggard. And it was between Tyson Walker and AJ Hoggard. Walker's going to be that scorer, but I think Hoggard's just kind of the glue that keeps it all together. Dawson Garcia, who's going to have a stupid statistical season. I don't know how many wins Minnesota will actually have, but Dawson Garcia's actual stats are just going to be ridiculous. And then I got to go with Terrence Shannon, who I think is going to be really, really good for Illinois and average 20 points per game. Hard not to put a 20-point per game scorer on the first team all conference. So that wraps up the Big Ten show. Did a solid here. I appreciate it. Tomorrow, I'm going to do the ACC. I do have a special guest host, one of my old buddies who has been around for a while. His name is Luke Glockenberg. Very sharp kid. Knows a lot about the college basketball game up there in the Northeast area. Bryant and teams like that, very sharp. But he's a Louisville kid through and through, so he's going to give us a rundown on the Louisville Cards tomorrow and a lot of the ACC, which is shaping up to be a very fun conference, obviously, with all the changes coming up there and all of the high-powered, top-heavy rosters that they have. But there's also some teams with an influx of transfers that are going to be fun. And for DFS purposes, maybe not winning games, but they're going to put up some big-time stats. And that's really, at the end of the day, unless you're a fan of that program, what we care about anyways. So I appreciate everybody who continues to watch these previews. Plenty more coming. Don't forget Thursday. So that's tomorrow, 9 p.m. PST, same time, ACC preview. Then Thursday night, we switch back to the CFB version of the show, covering the Saturday main slate for college football. Then we have the Saturday morning pre-lock show. And then next week, 3 more preview shows for college basketball. And before you know it, the season will be here. Thanks a lot, guys. See you tomorrow night for the ACC preview. Make sure you slap that like button. Drop a comment if you want. Helps the show, helps the network. Keep on supporting it. The content is going to continue to improve and grow, and I will see you guys next time.